So good to see so many of you in here. This is awesome. Thank you so much for joining the first digital music chat for MusicACT. This is great. It's so good to see so many people here, so many familiar faces, so many people that, you know, this might be their first time in this. This is awesome. Today's music chat is on what your vision looks like, which is obviously really exciting. It's something that every artist and every manager, every industry worker really needs to think about. And today we are having Josh Garrard and Ash Gray presenting this one. Josh is an incredible creative director and graphic designer. He's worked on a myriad of campaigns across a wide variety of artists in Canberra and outside of Canberra, if I'm not wrong, Josh.
Yeah, a few. Yeah,
a couple. He's been my go-to guy for graphic design for a long time as well. So I'm really excited to see what he says today. We've also got Ash Gray, who is a really incredible video director, who's worked on some seriously good award-winning music videos and film clips. I think we're going to see some of those today, potentially. Is that right, Ash?
A couple of little snippets here and there.
Little snippets here and there. Sweet. Awesome. We'll also remind everyone that we are recording this. So if you don't want to be seen, totally fine. You can turn your camera off. Yeah, just so that it's available later for people that can't make it today. And yeah, I think I'll hand over to the director of MusicACT, Daniel Ballantyne, to give us a bit of an update on where MusicACT is at and how we're going on things. So over to you, Daniel.
Okay, thanks. And for everybody who doesn't know, that was Billy Bianchini, the program manager, who
yeah, true.
his usually enthusiastic way has jumped straight in. Okay. Yeah, I'm the director of MusicACT. I would just like to kick off with an acknowledgement of country. MusicACT acknowledges the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the lands where we are meeting on. MusicACT wishes to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture, especially their contribution through music, and also the contribution they make to life in Canberra and the region. We'd also like to acknowledge all other First Nations peoples who are with us and whose lands we gather. Okay, MusicACT has obviously had to respond to the reality of lockdowns, and some time before this current lockdown, we'd already started developing a digital program. I strongly encourage you to have a look at our website about that, but music chats traditionally are a program where we would get together as a group of people at a venue. We'd typically have some great speakers and they would talk about, you know, whatever their chops were in the music industry or whatever lessons that they've learned. We'd also have a live performance and typically put on a tab. I'm sorry, none of those things are going to happen today, except we're going to, at the end, open the mic up to for a general chat and questions at the end. And there will be questions that you can ask throughout this event. There'll be breaks that Ash and Josh will create to enable you to put something into the typed in chat. I just want to quickly talk about some pretty important stuff. There are opportunities in the ACT and the Commonwealth to help you with your music projects and your financial and mental health. In particular, Homefront 3 funding was announced last week. Homefront 3 is a program which is specifically for artists, and it's a funding amount up to $10,000. The reality is for most musicians and indeed many artists generally is that your music, if you're playing live, it's where you might generate some income to reinvest into your next music project, your recordings, your video, whatever it is that you want to invest in. Obviously, without any gigs on, that's not possible. So Homefront attempts to sort of bridge that gap. If you are self-employed and you have a successful business and you're earning, but I think it's in excess of $50,000 to $70,000 a year, you can apply for ACT government small business support if you're self-employed. The Commonwealth government, of course, has emergency funding. And I want to emphasize that we'll be putting these details up in the chat and also provide a link to MusicACT's link tree so that you can have a look at these things. If you want to apply for funding, I consider my role critical to that in terms of helping you. If you want to have a conversation about whether you're eligible or whether you think you've got a good idea or whether you need some support with information or understanding what it's all about, please call me or send me an email. I'd also like to point out Support Act. This is a really incredible service. I've availed it myself in terms of mental health first aid training, and you can call on 1300 731 303 or go to the website and you can have a talk about your particular situation. That includes not just your mental health, but your financial position and emergency funding. They have one of the most accessible emergency funding programs available in Australia for people in the industry at the moment. So that's pretty much me in terms of emergency funding, financial support, and hopefully, if you need it, some mental health support. Two critical things that are going to be emerging in the industry nationally soon. One is a project that we've been pushing really hard in the ACT and nationally, and that's Our Soundtrack, Our Stories. Whilst it's impossible for live shows to be going ahead at the moment, we're encouraging through the Our Soundtrack, Our Stories campaign that people listen to Australian music. And to that end, Billy has put together some of the most fantastic playlists that include not only Australian, but Canberra music. And it's almost now the go-to source for a survey of great music, especially out of Canberra. Every time you play it, obviously, it's a stream will go to the particular artist. Look, I'm not going to kid myself that streaming income is pitiful, but it's something. But it's also important, I think, for the wider listening audience, not just us, that they hear Australian music. And our goal is to make sure that you hear Canberra music in Platypus Shoes and places like that. The other campaign, which is equally important for all of us, is Vax the Nation. This is an extraordinary campaign. At last count, almost 300 music industry organisations, commercial, private, publicly funded, you name it, and artists have put money together to start a television, social media, radio campaign to encourage everybody to vaccinate. Essentially, we won't get our live gigs back until we do. It's the one thing that you can do right now is to get vaccinated. This is launching as a sort of a shadow campaign tonight, and will be commencing full time from 6 a.m. tomorrow with fantastic media coverage. The fundraising around this has been incredible. I don't know if you know a guy called Russell Howcroft. He's known for his appearances on the Gruen Transfer. He's the creative genius behind this campaign. We've been preparing materials, and I hope you can get behind it through your socials. We're going to make available various tiles and graphics that you could use to say that you're behind the vaccination campaign. Anyway, that's enough raving from me. I'm going to give it back to Billy.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. So yeah, we'll get stuck in with Josh and Ash, which is what we all are here for, I suppose. Just a quick note: if you do have any questions, do just put them in the Zoom chat below. There'll be opportunities along the presentation to field some of those questions, but we don't want to disrupt Josh and Ash's flow too much with all of us in here. So yeah, drop them in the chat, and then I'll chime in and ask those questions for you. Over to Josh and Ash.
Sweet. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got the whole setup here. I've got like the iPad for the presentation. Here, yeah. Already.
All sorted.
Right. So we can make this work. Sweet. I think we're almost there. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So, what your vision looks like. First things first, we're going to start off with some introductions. Starting, of course, with Ash. You want to take it away?
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. My name's Ash Gray. I'm a writer and director, and I love making short horror films, music videos, and filming live performances, sessions, and behind the scenes videos. I won't talk too much about myself here. I know Josh has a show reel ready to go, so I'll let the visuals speak for me here.
Oh, sweet. Let's see if we can figure this out. Anything else to add there, Ash?
No, I can tag over to you now, Josh.
Beautiful. All right. Sweet. So my name's Josh. I'm a artist designer. I've been working in, I guess, Canberra and beyond's creative industries for almost 3 years now. And that's primarily been, I guess, in music circles, which is a passion of mine. So I don't want to make this an ad for myself or anything like that. I want to get in and start, talking about visions and ideas, but here's a brief little look at my work. I've done work for UC, I've done work for Warm Water, Pass Out, and then artists like Teen Jesus, Spartanic, Moaning Lisa, Slow Dial, Nico Pink. And yeah, so I've got a bit of experience and I'm really keen to talk about it. So, all right, before we begin, just a few notes. Let me get them up here. All right. First things first, every project is different. As you can see, between us, Ash and I have worked on a lot of different projects with a lot of different people. And so, yeah, every client is different, every process is different, and every definition of success is different, which means there's no real single set in stone formula for a perfect release. So while we want to use this time to talk about, I guess, the visual side of your more auditorial medium, we're going to talk less about the project specifics and like the what to do when kind of stuff, and more about the mindsets and frameworks that we can use to approaching a project. So yeah, and as Billy mentioned before, please ask some questions. So we're talking purely from our own experience, which means we'll be talking about ideas and methods and projects that we think work and that we all like, but we're not recording artists. We're talking from a visual creative's point of view. And yeah, it's called Music Chats for a reason. So drop your questions in the chat and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. So yeah, we're super down for discussion. Sweet. Cool. All right. Pretty much the way we've structured this presentation is we've broken it down to 3 general concepts to kind of consider and get right when considering the visual element of your project / release. So that's the mindset, the vision, and the process. So yeah, we'll break them all down individually, but as an overview, when we talk about the mindset, I guess we're talking about the attitudes and understanding that you're equipped with when you start this journey. When we talk about the vision, I guess we're talking about forming a cohesive concept and I guess the exploring, constructing and planning that goes into that. And when we talk about the process, we're talking about physically materializing it, as well as the people that you bring on board to do so. Cool. So before we jump into it, this is a shit ton of buzzwords, just I guess to begin with. They have no real meaning without context. So we'll break them down, I guess, in the context of a music project. So whether it's a release, a live show, etc. And yeah, start with a mindset. We still with me? Cool.
Still with you.
All right. So basically with a mindset, the first mindset adjustment I guess we want to put forward in this presentation is the importance of what your project looks like, which I know to a certain extent we're stating the obvious. I think, if you didn't already know it was important, you probably wouldn't have tuned in. But I think for me, at least, one of the most detrimental mindsets to a music project's potential is artists who kind of only really think of it as a box to tick during the release cycle. So kind of, sweet, our song's recorded, it's mastered, we're super excited about it and keen to get this out as quickly as possible. Oh shit, we should probably, give it some cover art first. Josh, we're releasing in a week, can you do this real quick? But yeah, in all seriousness, I yeah, Ash and I totally understand and respect that excitement. We're excited about it too. This is a passion of everyone's, but dreams and visions aside, I guess, purely from a practical standpoint, the vast majority of first-time interactions with your music are going to be visual. So essentially they're your first impression. And that's incredibly important for engagement. In most cases, they're going to see the cover art before they hear the song. They're going to see the poster before they come to your show. And even with music videos, they'll be listening and watching something at the same time. And so what your music looks like to people can not only influence your release, it can also heavily influence your artist brand as a whole. Don't know why that box is popping up there. Yeah, so for this reason, it shouldn't be an afterthought. And yeah, this is the importance of visuals is the first main point that we want to push with this. I want to talk about the word brand really quickly. I want to go on a little tangent because I do recognize that this is a bit of a scary word, especially for people who are really passionate about their art, mostly because of its heavy association with terms like marketing, products, and I guess capitalism as a whole. It's most frequently used within the context of making money. And so for artists who value authenticity and expression, it's a really easy word to dismiss and even resent. So yeah, I guess just to be clear, when we're talking about your artist brand, we're talking a lot less about the marketing strategy side of it. And more generally about how you present yourself and how you're perceived by your current and potential listeners, which, yeah, it's still a bit of a daunting thought and can still, I guess, tie into the money side of things. But yeah, it can be way more elevating if you look at your artist brand as, I guess, a canvas for expression rather than a marketing burden. Visuals are potential. And if we focus on this potential, not the box to tick, that can be really beneficial. From your music to your artwork to your social posts and like video updates and everything. It's a canvas, not a chore. And everything you do is an opportunity to build your brand and tell your story, essentially. So yeah, I guess this is the idea. This idea is kind of the basis on which we develop the vision in the next section. And I guess ironically, this approach kind of sells more. Like authenticity is way more appealing to audiences, I guess. So just to recap that, visuals are really important, but they also have a lot of potential. Ash, did you have?
Yeah, absolutely.
That?
So a couple of things I'll jump in. I just wanted to mention, I won't get too bogged down with figures or anything too marketing heavy, but I wanted to throw some quick stats out there and show sort of why visuals are so important for artists of any kind and why it's important to have that in your mindset. So as Josh mentioned, when people are looking up artists online or on Spotify, etc., visuals are a lot of the first thing people see before they listen to your work. And so these visuals are, telling a story of what people can expect to hear and what the first impression is going to be. And so my first fun statistic that I'll throw out there, 80% of Australians have social media, and 1 in every 3 online minutes worldwide is spent on social media. So it's becoming a really common way for people to search information and to look into artists, and platforms like Facebook and Instagram are a great way to get a really quick visual summary of an artist, and they serve as a way for people to get to know who you are and what your brand is. And my last fun facts that I'll throw out, and I promise they'll be the last ones, 75% of people are more likely to remember an artist or brand if there's a consistent color palette or theme in the branding. And specifically looking at video, which is my field, video content generates 300% more viewership on social media pages and websites. So with that in mind, thinking about every aspect of what you do as a creative and every aspect of your creative process, there's a chance there for more creative expression and a way to share your story with your audience. It's an easy way to have a content generating mindset without having to get stuck into a marketing strategy. So thinking, I'm recording a session today, I'm going to take a photo, I'm going to do a quick video, I'm going to be, putting what I'm doing out there as a form of self-expression and just an extension of your art.
Sweet. Awesome. Before we run any further, Billy, do you have any questions?
We do. How exciting. We've got a question from Joe Pavis. This one is for Josh, but I think it would be good to get Ash's answer on this as well, because it'd just be good to know. What is the time frame that you like to work with when you're generating your kind of style of visual work?
We'll definitely touch a lot on that further in the presentation, but I guess the quick answer to that, it definitely depends on the project, but as much time as possible. And yeah, we'll expand on that later on in the presentation, and we'll hopefully answer that question a bit more.
Yeah, I think there kind of is no one size fits all for when to get someone involved, and particularly with design and video, that is something that can take a fair bit of time to put together in terms of editing a video or creating a design from scratch. And so I do kind of agree with Josh in that the more time, the better. But at the same time, if you suddenly realize I've got to have this ready in 2 weeks, it is something that both of us make work.
Yeah, so I guess it super depends. But hopefully we'll answer that question a bit more as we progress.
Nice one. And just a reminder to the new people that have joined the Zoom, drop your questions in the Zoom chat and we'll answer them when we get a second. All right, back to you guys.
Sweet. All right. Cool. So we're going to progress more into the vision now. So I guess most of you are familiar vaguely about what a project vision means. Like, it's essentially the picture you want to paint or the story that you want to tell, which, as far as I understand, is pretty much the basis for what most people do as musicians. So like, I don't want to mansplain that any further. But yeah, I guess most of you, when you start a project, will at least have an inkling of a vision to begin with. Like, that's kind of where the music comes from. So what we will do next is, I guess, push that further and use the importance and the mindset that we just talked about, and I guess figure out how to apply that vision to the rest of your release and what it looks like. There you go, title of the presentation. Sweet. Okay, so to start off with, let's reiterate what we talked about just now. Everything is an opportunity to tell your story. So the artwork, the promo, the socials, the merch, the music videos, everything. Obviously the music is the main attraction, but it doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting, I don't think. I think if you're doing it right, it shouldn't be. Yeah, you've got all these potential canvases, and we want to jump on that opportunity and use it to amplify our vision. And I think for me, the main tool to do this effectively, the main tool that we'll use is consistency. It's kind of like Ash mentioned before. More specifically, consistency within release/project, and then consistency with your artist brand as a whole. So yeah, I guess I'm going to say consistency a lot. My apologies. It's kind of the big buzzword for this section. But this consistency can be with colors, imagery, motifs, language, ultimately all of the above. But to put it a bit of a different way, it's this idea that your music is like a little world. And while there are lots of different applications like artwork, music videos, etc., they all still live in the same little world. They all still live in the same little family. So we're gonna have a look at some examples in a second. We're gonna use examples pretty heavily for this section. I think the best method for a lot of artists who have trouble putting a face to their music is to look at where it came from. Look at what inspired it, and I guess what you picture in your head when you think about your music. So yeah, I'm going to show some examples of this kind of in practice. I've kept them fairly recent and I've kept them Australian. So starting off with We Will Always Love You by the Avalanches. Now, I'm a bit biased because I'm a huge fan of this album and the Avalanches as a whole, but I think I wanted to show this because I think this album is a really good example of a fully realized vision as far as a concept album goes, across both the music and the visuals. So doing some reading about this, when writing the music, they worked with themes of love, loss, space, signal, and transmission, and overall took like a real celestial kind of approach to it. And already, if you have a look at it on a surface level, the rollout is aesthetically super on point with these themes, and looks really good. We've got like a consistent color scheme here. The symbolism that the artist they work with has developed is striking, reflects the themes really well, and it's used really consistently throughout. The single art, the merchandise, the press photography. And yeah, I'm a really big fan of this project. I could go even deeper and talk about some of the wacky ways that they kind of develop these visuals. One of these images was basically they got an image, they turned it into sound and then turned it back into an image, and they did some crazy stuff like that. But yeah, I won't get carried away. Essentially, it's a super out there example that I think really illustrates what a seamless and consistent relationship between the idea, the music, and the visual style can look like. So yeah, I know that not everyone tuning in is writing a huge concept album about the cosmos and the human condition. And that's totally okay. It'd be kind of like exhausting. So next example, we'll strip it back a bit. Polish Club put out an album recently, and I wanted to talk about it because I think it's a good example of how a release can be fun and consistent without blatantly being a crazy concept album. Polish Club don't really sing like ambitiously about the universe. They're a lot more down to earth. They like to, I guess, mess around a bit and have fun, but still with like a level of sincerity in their music. But I still think they managed like a really good eye-catching release that is consistent both with, I guess, itself and their kind of loud brand as an artist. It's colorful. It's kind of this tongue-in-cheek fast food motif. It doesn't take itself, much like the band doesn't take itself too seriously. And I think it's obviously, while the music itself isn't literally about food, I think it's still consistent with, I guess, the loud, hard upon my sleeve nature of the band in general. Yeah, I think, cool. Next example, I'm going to strip it back even further. We've got East album. And yeah, wanted to strip it back on this one. There's some really fun sounds on this album, but at the same time, the music itself can be really personal and emotional. And so the reason I wanted to talk about this one is because all that's really needed to effectively convey these kind of raw qualities visually is this fun but like intimate photo style, I guess. And yeah, once again, it's used consistently throughout the single and album artworks, socials. And I think it really fits the artist and the album perfectly. I think it acts as a good example of how simplicity can still paint a picture and how, I guess, a consistent release can be achievable without like overthinking it and pulling out all the stops. So yeah, 3 very different examples there, but hopefully that illustrates this idea of consistency. And we're going to talk about how we get to this point in a second, but I first really quickly want to return to this little world idea. And I guess if we push it even further and start thinking about your artist brand, we can still apply the same thinking here. So it's this idea that so like we said before, all your project is this little world, and everything lives within this little world. And so if all your projects are their own little world, all these little worlds exist in the same galaxy, and that galaxy is your artist brand. Does that kind of make sense? All right, hold on. Let's, and keep forgetting I'm talking to a Zoom chat and everyone's on mute. But I think we have a few examples of this concept in play, first of which is the XX. This is probably the most blatant and simple way to kind of illustrate this. Their name is the XX and all of their albums have an X on it. That's pretty much what their artist brand is. but they've also still pushed this a little bit further with Jamie X and his solo stuff. He uses the same motif, except with just a portion of the X. And already that's a super consistent artist brand that spans more than just one project. And Ash, I believe you've got an example as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one artist that I'll talk about because she is a great example of era branding is Taylor Swift. So every single one of her albums has a visual theme, and her social media posts, music videos, photos, etc., all have that kind of theme that's instantly recognizable, particularly with her most recent releases like Lover and Folklore. So that if you do have a look at her Instagram, for example, you can tell which album came out when, because you'll suddenly have all these really sort of bright, airy colors and style posts. And then when she gets to Folklore, you'll get to the black and white. And I think that's just a really good example of an instantly recognizable brand. But one thing she does that I like is that she still reinvents herself and changes her theme with every album release. So ideas can change project to project, and consistency can be applied to just one launch or one song or one album. It doesn't have to be sort of your entire career as an artist. You can change it up every single time you do something new. You know, maybe one album is dark and you want something really moody, and maybe another album is really bright and sunny. So I'm a really big fan of My Chemical Romance, and so they did they're another good example. They did a concept album, The Black Parade, that came out back in 2006, and that had a really particular theme and look and vibe. And then, similar to Taylor Swift, you know, different eras, the next album looked and sounded completely different. And I think when it comes to creating your vision, it's worthwhile to write down or think about the vibe of your album, the song or the launch or whatever it is. Does it have a particular theme? Is it making a statement? Are you trying to tell a story? You know, writing ideas down, you know, does it feel warm? Is it cold? When you hear a song, do you think about being in the forest? Anything like that at all that just adds ideas to what you're wanting to portray. And I think music is a medium that inspires vision. So when hearing a song, plenty of people, myself included, see a story going along with it. And so both graphic design and visuals, music videos, they're a chance to tell more of that story. So I think the visuals can really be used to aid your art. And then I think, Josh, you had another example.
No, actually I didn't. I think that was...
Oh, that one came first.
Yeah. Reshuffled a bit. Cool. All right. So before we go any further, we're just gonna do another double check for questions.
Yes.
Willie, have you got anything?
We do. We got some questions. First one is from D-Dub. Hey, D-Dub.
Hey,
How much wishful thinking can or should be your image/vision on social media? It goes on to say, I mean, showbiz is a lot of willing suspension of disbelief. So where do you draw the line, or do you draw the line at all, between stage performance persona versus real life?
So I think
Tough question.
I think there's totally different ways that you can approach that. Sort of, you have some artists who put on a stage persona and then their entire social media campaign is around that persona. So there's a Swedish band called Ghosts that are one of my favorite bands, and they kind of have everyone wears costumes, and essentially their social media is all the lead singer as a character rather than his real life persona. And I think that's kind of up to you individually as an artist of what you want to portray. Do you want to, you know, sort of be, I guess, like Kiss would be another great example. They have the paint, they have the persona, and the gimmick, so to speak. And there is that line of which path you want to go down.
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to what you want to say, like what picture you want to paint for your audience, and whether, you know, going for a whole super raw, authentic sort of thing does that more successfully for you, or whether it, you know, you find it more effective to take on some kind of persona that kind of exaggerates it a bit. It entirely depends on what your vision is, on what you want to say with your project.
I have a little question for you as well, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Putting yourself in the shoes of maybe not an artist that's kind of just starting out, but if you were to put yourself in the shoes of an artist that has already started making a lot of music and is already kind of out there and is trying to refine, based on this chat, you know, they might be trying to refine what they're artist brand or what their visuals look like or how they tie everything in together. Do you think there's any risk associated with changing things dramatically one way or the other? Or do you think it's fine to like just go straight ahead and just decide, yep, this is what I'm doing?
There's definitely risk there as far as brand recognition goes. Like if you're already established, you're shaking that foundation a little bit. But on the flip side of that, there's also benefit in reinventing yourself. It's something new and it's fresh and it's interesting. And that's something that definitely catches people's attention if it's done right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if it's something that's authentic to you and you're making, a big change in, your visuals or your brand, but you feel like that's the path that you definitely want to go down, and that's sort of the way you want to identify as an artist, then I think that's the path to go down, whatever feels the most authentic to you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Cool.
No, that's it for now, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah. Keep on moving. You got it.
Cool. All right. We're going to continue with the process then. So yeah, I guess you've got your vision. The examples are very cool, Josh. Good job. But how do we actually get there? What's the communication with like a designer like? And what happens if I don't have a fully mapped out vision for my music project? So this is, I guess, where we get a bit Christopher Nolan on you, in the sense that these ideas that we talked about at the beginning aren't completely linear, in the sense that you don't have to have a completely fleshed out vision for a project before you begin the visual process side, and before you start talking to visual creatives. Quite the opposite. If you plan on working with a visual creative, we strongly encourage you to introduce them as early on in the timeline as possible. So Joe, to answer your question before, yeah, we can't exaggerate this enough. You should introduce a visual creative as early as possible. And I guess there are multiple reasons for this. So if you have a few gaps in your vision and you're not fully sure where you're going with your brand, then this is a really good opportunity to seek some creative direction. A creative director's role is to work with you and develop and understand the vision up to, I guess, a bit more of a polished point. And then from there, they kind of oversee and maintain consistency across the project, which can be really beneficial. On the flip side of that, I guess, if you have a fully developed vision for your project, and I guess if you plan to take on more of a creative direction role yourself, introducing a visual creative early is still really important, because it gives them, I guess, time to understand your vision, and I guess to provide their own perspectives and input, and I guess address any feedback that you've got as well. And yeah, as much time as possible is great, because nothing stifles potential like a tight deadline. This is a very important point that Ash and I agree with, and I'm sure any other creatives can agree with as well. Yeah, cool. So just to talk about the word collaboration a bit, a really good way to approach a relationship with another visual designer is to consider it, I guess, a collaboration, not a transaction, which, yeah, we do recognize that, I guess, if you're paying us, which you should be, it is technically a transaction. So we do acknowledge that. But I guess this approach builds a creative relationship in a way that kind of prioritizes the vision over anything else. And that can be really beneficial to a project. People like Ash and I guess, are creatives too. Projects like this, I guess, are our songs. This is like our music. And we really want to add value to it. And so I think this approach can ultimately see a really well-realized project. Ash, did you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Josh has said, there are so many different approaches to presenting a vision to another creative that you want to work with. In the past, I've worked with artists who have had really specific ideas they want to create, and they'll bring a hefty vision to me, and others who have brought more vague ideas and they want someone else to shape it and turn it into a creative vision. And then others who have said, here's my song, do what you want with it in terms of a music video. So there really is no standard approach to bring an idea to someone else. It's totally fine to bring an idea that's a baby idea, and it's also fine to bring something that has been really well thought out and you're really specific about what you want. Something else I wanted to touch on is having a collaborative mindset when bringing other creatives on board. Alternative point of views and ideas stand to make your concept stronger, and they can really define what you want or what you don't want. So it's important to work with people who you vibe with and who you trust, and to keep in mind that the person you're collaborating with also wants to leave their creative mark on a project. So this says something about their quality of work and brand too. Personally, whenever I work on a music video, I pour my heart into it and I want it to be the best it can be for the artist, but it also shows what I can do as an artist, and it's something that I'm probably going to want to, put out there and showcase myself or enter into short film competitions. So I think having someone who shares your enthusiasm and really feels passionate about your project and getting it out there into the world is really important.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion for us, and we always want to share that. So yeah, I guess with that understanding, all that's really left to do is to establish creative direction. So whether that is you or someone you bring on to kind of help you out with it, then establish your collaborators. So find anyone that you plan on working with if you don't plan on doing it all yourself. A good way to do this is, I guess, to find designers, illustrators, photographers, videographers that have a style that you really like. You can do this by, I guess, talking to your fellow artists, finding out who they recommend, networking, or even just sliding into Instagram DMs. And then once you've done that, execute your vision. And I guess here we're starting to reach a point where the rest is completely up to you. Some people, I guess, will do this with in-house teams. So artists like Brockhampton and Genesis Owusu have, I guess, a team of really tightly knit creatives that kind of all work together to execute the same vision. And some people will do this on their own. Some people will, I guess, experiment with different approaches from project to project. But yeah, ultimately, the rest is completely up to you, and completely dependent on the specifics of your ideas and your vision. And that's super exciting. That is an idea that really excites me, and I think it should really excite you too as well. Yeah, do we have any questions, Billy?
We don't have any from the group, but I've got one. As always, sorry. I just wanted to ask about, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to see if you had any tips about like really finding that voice and that vision for artists that might be at the start of their journey. Like, it's obviously, you've done a really good job of explaining why visuals are so important and how they can be so effective in telling a story. But in terms of, I guess, deciding or like, discovering what that story is, have you ever had an experience with an artist like that where you've had to knuckle down in that, or do you have any tips for that?
I think, Ash, do you have an answer to this first, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think, again, there's kind of no right or wrong way to approach it. I think working with artists who are still trying to define their brand, it's just a matter of looking at the music and kind of really analyzing, who they are and what they're wanting to say. And I think that in the beginning, you can have that fluidity of testing things out and seeing, what does stick and what doesn't, or, maybe this represented you at one point and you don't feel that way anymore. So you're going to change, it's a different era. You're going to change branding. But I think it does come down to that kind of, brainstorming and, whether it's putting a whole bunch of words on paper and going, okay, these are the elements that I think define me, or finding something visual that you think speaks to you.
Yeah, I think there are, I guess, lots of different kinds of artists. There are artists who think they know what they want, and then they see it and actually want something different. There are artists that don't know what they want until they see what they don't want. And so I guess in a way it can be it can potentially, for someone like Ash and I, it can be like a blank canvas that we can work through ourselves, like we talked about before, introducing some creative direction to help you through that. But yeah, I guess with this presentation, we want to really encourage people to think about that a bit more, and think about where their music comes from a bit more, if that makes sense.
I do have one question that's popped through
Great.
from Natalie. Thanks, Natalie. This is a question about, I guess the logistics and the financial side of getting all of this done. And Natalie's question was, how much does it cost generally for someone contacting a visual artist to start a project from scratch and do everything that the visual artist would recommend?
Look, honestly, there's no right answer to that. It's like, how long is a piece of string? It's going to vary depending on who you talk to and what your vision is. But yeah, I guess we do kind of recognize that not every artist has a huge budget to hire a bunch of people. And so one of the big points we did want everyone to take away from this chat is that visuals are super important, and that they're a super worthy investment if you're really serious about your music. But we also recognize this as well. And so I guess we have nothing against doing it yourself. So like it's your project. Nothing's really stopping you. Like we saw with the East example, there are ways to kind of paint a picture with simplicity, and there's benefit in not overthinking it. But I think one thing that artists have going for them is the fact that music projects are the coolest projects that everybody in graphic design student like dreams of doing. And I'm sure Ash as a videographer can relate to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think my advice would be, don't be scared to approach collaborators with a limited budget. Really in terms of giving a cost, like Josh has said, it is kind of hard without knowing what's going to be involved. But an example I can give, I've created a music video for an artist where the video was a really simple concept, and there were two actors going through a series of motions telling a story as silhouettes on a screen, and it was filmed in 5 hours and edited in 4. And even though it was a simple idea, it was very powerful and one of my favorite music videos. But you can kind of, start with a simple idea, make it really powerful, make it something that's going to be really eye-catching, and then build from there. So the sky's kind of the limit, and you can come to a creative with a smaller budget and still get something effective.
Nice. Yeah. Perfect. We're going to have a couple of more questions coming through if you guys don't mind answering. This one's from Annie M. I think this one's for Ash, but Josh, pitch in if you want as well. Do you do all of the video production yourself, or do you have a team?
So it's a little bit of both. I've definitely done both. I prefer to have a team because I do think having that extra set of hands is really wonderful, and having more people to work together, your music video ends up looking better if you do have someone whose specific job is the camera, someone who's directing, someone who's doing the lighting, someone who's got the production design. The more elements you can add, the bigger and more fantastic I think it can be. But having said that music video that I mentioned earlier with the silhouettes against the screen, that was myself as a director, and I also edited the project, and then a cinematographer. So it was really just two of us who made it work. So I think more is better, but you can also do something really effective with less.
Nice one. Anything to add, Josh?
No, not really. I'd just be reiterating what Ash was saying.
True. The questions are flooding in. This is great. This one's from Daniel. You seem to come from a solo artist perspective. How do you engage with bands, and how can they consolidate their vision?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think, to reiterate what we said before, it's looking at where the music came from. And so, that can be asking questions like, what brought the band together? What are the common passions that I guess drive the music that you play as a band? Who's writing the music? Like, where's that coming from?
And I do think often it is that sense of collaboration and everyone coming together, and often people within a band have ideas that kind of all fall under the same umbrella, and as long as everyone's getting to pitch a creative idea in there, I think you can work with a band to create one cohesive vision.
There is like the unfortunate reality of compromise, especially when we're talking about bands. So that's not only between the artist and the visual creative, but that can also come, that can also exist within a band itself.
Nice one. Alrighty, there's more questions. This question is just in time, Emma. Thank you. Emma's just added a second half to her question just before I read it. Emma says, can you give a ballpark hourly rate to give us some idea, or can you give us a ballpark? Or more specifically, what portion of a budget do you suggest allocating to the visuals?
Cool.
We're getting to the nitty gritty now. Sorry,
The hard questions.
The hard questions. How much are you worth? Yeah.
Again, I think this is speaks to the importance of communication and introducing your visual creative as soon as possible so you can work on these things. Because like we said, every single project is different. And because of that, this is one of the reasons we didn't specifically address this as much when we did this talk, because we don't want to speak for everyone in the industry. I personally don't work with an hourly rate per se. I kind of quote a job. I talk with the artist first and kind of try and understand what they're after, and then I'll quote based on that. I don't know how you do it, Ash.
I'm fairly similar. I tend to do project by project, and it also depends on how big the project's going to be. If it is something that's fairly simple and it's going to take, less than a day and there aren't so many elements to it, it will cost less. If it's something where you come to me and say, I'd like to do a music video, I want to have 10 main actors in here and 5 locations, and I want this specific location that needs to be hired, there's kind of cost that keeps getting added for every single person who's involved. So really it comes down to the concept itself.
Yeah, I really wish we could give specific numbers on this, but we can't really do that without, I guess, overgeneralizing. But what we will say is that it's a really worthy investment.
If I can, I hope you guys don't mind if I can add to that slightly. If you were to say, if your budget for the whole release is $1,000, and but your vision is, I want to do like a crazy laser show at my single launch, and I also want to hire Kanye to do a verse on the track. Like there's obviously like the video content and that kind of thing, the visual branding, all those kinds of things. It's going to be a more significant portion of your budget because that's a really core element of what you're putting together. But if your vision is to keep it really simple and, and just do some acoustic stuff in a park somewhere, that's fine as well. But obviously that's going to take up far less of your budget. So you got to really decide on what your vision is for the project as a whole before you start thinking about how to cut and split the budget. Because sometimes you'll be able to do it for free, and sometimes it'll cost you $10,000. Yeah.
And I do think there is that sense of, if you do have a budget in mind, come to the creative with that and say, hey, this is what I've got, and this is the vibe or the kind of feel that I want to go with. And you can kind of then, come up with an idea together that is going to fit that budget, that is still going to be bringing your vision to life.
Yeah, it's why we kind of had this sort of step-based approach to this presentation. If you sort out your mindset and your vision before you jump into the process, you'll be way more well-equipped.
Nice one. Perfect. I think I don't have any other questions in here, but I might throw you both under the bus a little bit if you're all right with that. I think what really solidifies this whole process that you're talking about, because I've been through this process with you, Josh, and it was amazing. So thank you. But what really solidified it was kind of getting a feel for what that process feels like and what that collaboration feels like. So if there's anyone in the chat or anyone in the Zoom that, we've kind of come to the end of the presentation now. So thank you everyone for being here. Have we? Yeah, we have. Yeah. Thank you everyone for being here. So if there's anyone in the Zoom chat that wants to pitch a specific idea or has a specific problem about their visuals that they want to run by Josh or Ash, now's a really good time to do that. You can just unmute and jump in for it. If not, I'm just going to ask about everyone I know.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Now's a chance, everyone. Anyone?
I do have something that I want to talk about. I don't know if
Sorry,
everyone.
Natalie.
Hey! I feel like a bit bad that everyone needs to listen to.
No, it's good. This is great. Thank you, Natalie.
Don't worry,
Oh,
I've like for the entire presentation.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Well, I was wondering, because I've been asked to do like a radio show, like a 45-minute radio set, but film it. And it could be anything. And yeah, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I need to get like, and then that could coincide with the release of like an EP or something. And then I was thinking I should write a grant, and then I could ask someone to film it and everything. But yeah, I don't really know, I don't have the visual idea really of how to go about it or anything. But yeah, that's,
Big
I
question.
don't know what the question is, but yeah,
How?
yeah. Yeah, how?
I definitely think it'd be worthwhile if you are thinking of applying for a grant to fund it, of, talking to someone beforehand and saying, what kind of visuals do you think we could work with? What kind of budget would it be? So then you can apply for the grant with a specific number in mind. And so then you are working with the creative beforehand and kind of, I guess, getting a really specific idea of what you want. And particularly with applying for grants, the more kind of evidence you have and the more, support from a team that you have going forward and a clearer vision, I guess the more likely you are to get funded.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Daniel might be able to weigh in on that last point.
Yeah, look, I'd start with the tune and the music. What are you singing about? What are you saying? Who are you talking to? And that's at the very first point of departure. It's about the tune, and somehow that should, I don't know the tune, but if it speaks to something in particular that you're trying to put across, and it can be that, it can just be about love, but at least that's a starting point to try and fill in the visual. But surrounding yourself in a moment in time with some people that you want to work with, even though you may not be committed to them financially, but at least you're starting the conversation with potentially a creative director or a videographer or someone like that, and get them to bounce off, back to you with what your tune's about.
Yeah, cool.
It's like we said before, creative like Ash and I add value, and we're super keen to, I guess, help you build your vision up if you're not entirely sure where you're going with it.
From a public funding point of view, unless there is a specific arts outcome, like if you're looking at, for example, at Homefront funding, what they're really looking for mostly is that you've got a structured approach that's going to deliver an outcome, and they usually accept that throughout that process you will develop the creative outcome. So when you go into the grant, I think the earlier comments were proposing the team, pulling the team together, pulling the resources together, and the commitment. That's what that's really about. You don't have to answer the creative outcome question up front for the purposes of getting a grant. And if you want to have a chat offline with me, Natalie, I know who you are, so let's have a chat. If you want to apply for funding, we can have a crack at that if you want, but don't get lost in having all the answers up front. What they want to know is that you've got a capacity to deliver and a discipline to deliver, and you've surrounded yourself with equally minded people like Josh and Ash, whatever.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your help.
No worries. That's what we're here for.
Seeing as how amazing and insightful that was, does anyone else want to ask about their creative vision or their journey as an artist and how they can make that better? Now is the opportunity. You can. No, okay. All right.
Well done.
Last chance. Going. All right. Hopefully I've given everyone enough time to pitch in.
And before we go, the follow-up materials and things, Billy?
Yes. So the advantages of the modern world, all of the digital program assets and recordings are going to be available on the MusicACT website. If you just go to the MusicACT website and hit resources, there's a stack there. There's all the stuff from the previous digital programs. If you got something out of today, have a flick through those. We're going to be building that. That's going to be a growing compendium of resources for artists in the ACT. So please do check that out. Everyone that I've spoken to who's looked at it has gotten something amazing out of it. So please do that. Are there any final questions for Josh or Ash or Daniel or I about funding, about MusicACT, about visuals or anything like that.
And our next event is?
Yes, our next event is actually same day next week. On the 12th of September, we've got the final installment with music marketing strategist Dana Young, who's based in Colorado. She's worked with everyone from the Chainsmokers to James Brown to Alice in Wonderland, serious big artists. And the chat will be on building a coherent and engaging social media content strategy, which is also incredibly important, especially given what we've spoken about today.
Visual brand, yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be a really good one to get along to. I might even see Josh and Ash there in that one as well.
Yeah, that's.
So yeah, thank you. Great, heaps of thank yous coming through. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. You guys are the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. Big round of applause to Josh and Ash for a really, really great presentation. Please save this last slide here if you want to reach out to Josh and Ash.
Yeah, no, if you've got any questions that you think of immediately after this presentation finishes, that's definitely something I do. Feel free to, slide into our Instagram DMs and definitely have a look at our websites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to get in contact or ask some advice or anything like that, reach out for any reason, feel free to send a message through.
Yeah, huge thanks to Billy and Daniel and MusicACT for letting us come here and talk. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
And thanks everyone for coming as well. Thanks for your awesome questions.
Perfect. No worries. And yeah, please reach out to Daniel at musicact.com.au if you want any help with grant applications. Those are finishing up on the 23rd of September from memory. So that's coming up. So please do get cracking on those when you can. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. All right. We'll hopefully see you next week for the next one. Goodbye, everyone. See you around.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.